Hi everyone, and welcome to Daily Revelations, this weekly Bible study where we dive into God's Word one book at a time. And we are in the book of Genesis. This week we're focusing on Genesis 19. So we read through this chapter every day of the week, and we use a different precept method to just dig into God's Word and ask Him to reveal Himself to us and to learn from what He has to share with us. And so what I'm sharing with you, if you haven't joined me before, is just what God shared with me. And it's an encouragement to you to do the same thing. And God is more than likely not to speak the same thing to you. So I just encourage you to do this yourself, not just to learn from what I've chewed on and spit out and processed, because that's what God had to show me today. And it has to do a little bit with my hard-headedness, and maybe you've been there before. I tend to go back there a lot, but as I was reading through this, and the precept method that we use on day 3, this is day 3 of our study, is that we look at cross-references. So just read through this chapter, listen to it if you don't have time to read through it, and what verses pop out at you? Well, what cross-references can you follow from those verses to see what else the Bible has to say about those things? It's interesting. Usually I follow one and then it goes on, but there's 2 things in this chapter that God had me following cross-references for. I felt like I was all over the Bible. But in verse 26, it talks about Lot's wife. And we learn that Lot's wife was behind him, and she looked back and she became a pillar of salt. She wasn't quite convinced that she wanted to go the direction that God was moving her. Well, of course, we learned yesterday, as I talked about, that she was kind of dragged. The angels grabbed their hands and just said, let's go. But she looked back, and in that, she suffered a fate that, well, was very similar. She wasn't consumed by fire. She was just instantly turned into salt. And when you go to Luke 17, it talks about, remember Lot's wife. Whoever seeks to keep his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life will preserve it. That's Luke 17:32 and 33. And it talks about how when Jesus returns, that we cannot be hinged to things of this world. Our Father knows better, that we need to stay attached to Him and not to the things of the world. But then also I followed a couple verses about Lot's son-in-laws. They were even more resistant. They thought he was just jesting when he said that God was going to destroy Sodom. Oh yeah, whatever. He went out, spoke to his son-in-laws that were to marry his daughters, and said, get out of this place. This is verse 19. But he appeared to his son-in-laws to be jesting, and they suffered the fate of not listening. Well, that took me to a cross-references in Numbers 16. Some people that Moses had been put in charge of the Israelites, and there were people that stood up against him and said, who are you to be speaking for God? Can't God speak through us? And God opened up the earth and swallowed them. And later on, even after that happened, more people grumbled at Moses and said, look what you did. Well, he didn't do it, God did. And then God sent a plague against those people. And Moses again had to intercede for them. If you want to read that whole story, that's in Numbers 16. In Revelations 18, God says, there's going to be a point where I'm going to say, come out, people, so that you don't participate in the evil that's going on. And he's saying that to us continuously, really. Come out. Don't stay in these patterns of sin. Don't stay in the ways of the world. And if we don't listen, if we just think, well, maybe some other day, or you know what, God can wait, or I can just dabble in a little bit, the day will come and we won't know. And finally in Jeremiah 43, Jeremiah is warning all these people. And it says that in their arrogance, they told him that's a lie. God sends people to speak into our lives. Do we know God enough to know if that's God speaking or somebody else speaking? And who are we to argue with God, whoever he speaks through to us? And are we willing to listen? Those are questions I have going on through my mind, and some repenting I had to do too, because I can get very hard-hearted when people speak into my life and I'm thinking, well, that's good for you, but really it's good for me too. So just want to encourage you, dig into God's Word, see what he has to say to you today, and see what he has to reveal to you. And, well, sometimes it's easier than others to accept that, but if we don't, we get caught in these traps that eventually will lead us down a path of destruction. And so we just have to take it and say, yep, forgive me, God, help me to move on. So just encourage you to do that. So thanks for joining me today on Daily Revelations. I will see you tomorrow as we continue this study through Genesis 19. Bye, everyone.